Thanks for tuning in to the Our Football Network as it's time to mock draft. That's right. We're going to mock draft a little bit live. Not that we're live on the air, but this is a little bit of a different mock draft. And that is, in fact, that Dave Syvertsen and I are going to actually conduct a mock draft as we go through it. It'll be his picks, my picks, rotating from 1 all the way down to 32 in the first round. Of course, we'll be on Tuesday once again for our Draft 2.0 special, and that is more in line with the format that we did in our first mock draft. We have John Cooper come in. We base it mainly on his overall rankings, and we'll talk more about that, of course, on Tuesday. By the way, is that still just the first round, or are we going to a 2-round on Tuesday?
We're going to go to a 2-rounder. So in terms of the show, we're going to have to be either really quick with analysis, because I know some people always want to hear their team talked about.
Really, Dave? That didn't happen to us last time?
I like a good challenge. So I do think we can go through every pick, but some will be much more talked about than others. But I think that's going to be a challenge we should take on.
Yeah, so you just got to keep that in mind. You know, we can't be on there for 2 hours. So like Dave said, but that's for Tuesday. We'll explain it and we'll do the best that we can. And obviously we're going to get better at this because we have more information each week. And a matter of fact, you can check out the interviews that I've been doing, and that helps me out an awful lot, digging into our insiders, our team insiders. And we have a bunch of them already, of course, in the library that you can check out. That's why you want to subscribe here to the Our Lads Football channel. And we're going to keep those up. So 32 before the draft, I'm going to get them all in. And so once we get to April, for sure, not only me, because obviously I need all the help I can get, but Dave, our top scouts, Dave and John, are going to be fully engulfed in all of the draft picks, going inside countless hours of film room study. And it's going to be awesome between now and the draft. This guide is from 2024. Of course, the 2025 version is coming out. I think we're delivering it, or the goal is to deliver it around April the 7th. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that you can't order it right now. It's actually a good idea to order this as soon as possible, just to make sure you have that in the bank, just in case, hey, tough times maybe, you got to pay for this, that, and the other thing. So make sure you get this paid for already. So you'll have it in your mailbox at least a couple of weeks before the draft. Okay, so it's going to be Dave. It's going to be me. We're going to go back and forth. We also have a timer. So let me see. Where's the timer? Let me put the timer up here. Make sure I've got all this stuff right. All right, so this is a timer. We're not going to put it on the screen, but we're just going to put on the side, and we've got 2 minutes per pick. And that's a max. That doesn't mean we have to use all 2 minutes, just 2 minutes per pick. And once I reset the clock for every pick, I'm going to keep an eye on it. And if we get too close to 2 minutes, I'll let Dave know, or let myself know. And then we got to get the pick in and move on to the next one. So I'll start that in just a little bit. And then here is actually what you're going to be seeing throughout the mock draft. This is from Pro Football Focus. And Dave, you use this a lot. I'm going to have a link in the description. So if you want to order this, you want to subscribe to Pro Football Focus, you can do that if you haven't done that already. Explain a little bit about what this is, Dave.
Yeah, PFF has done an outstanding job with their mock draft simulator. Basically, you can just create your own mock drafts all day, every day. It has every single pick, all 7 rounds from all 32 teams, including all these picks that have been traded. And you can kind of just play around and with any team you want. You could control all 32 teams. You could pick one team to control, and the simulator will take care of the other 31 teams. You can make trades. You could trade players. I mean, it's the most realistic simulator. They've done a fantastic job, and I'm really happy that we can promote them through our mock draft.
Okay, so let's get right to it. Dave, you have the first pick. Next time we do this, by the way, I'm going to feel a lot better because the majority of my interviews were on your end. And I was going, damn. Every time I kept looking at the ones that I had all my notes for from all my interviews, I go, oh, it's Dave's. Oh, it's Dave's. I got to do more work now.
So anyway, you can criticize me more now. So
that's true.
You can get in front of the guys in the comments and criticize me in front of them. So
yeah, I'd like to do that. So all right. So anyway, let me go ahead and start the clock. I don't think these first several picks are going to take us very long, but you never know. So the clock has started. Dave, you've got the first pick. Tennessee, are they going to go quarterback or do something else kind of crazy?
I believe that they're going to do something on the crazy side because I'm not sure they see the quarterback in this draft that really fits what Callahan likes to work with. I'm also working on a piece right now for the R Lads Draft Hub in regard to which teams are in the market for Matthew Stafford, who is very available via the trade market. And Callahan worked with Stafford back in the day when they were in Detroit together. I think they're going to be a player for him and or Sam Darnold if he becomes available. I believe that the line in which their team president used, that you don't pass on a generational talent at number 1 overall, that leads me to believe it's going to be one of two guys. And I think it's going to be, by generational is an overused word in scouting, but there is one guy in this class that I would call that. And it's the player that can play both sides of the ball at a very high level. It's going to be Travis Hunter from Colorado.
All right. There you go. The first guy off the board, Travis Hunter. Yeah, and I'll tell you the truth. If you would have taken a quarterback, I probably would have done what you just did.
Yep.
Even with Cleveland. And I think Cleveland might feel the same way.
Yep.
Look, there's no star-studded quarterback. There just isn't. And
Yep.
I know these guys are going to go early, but
the more I study, the more I realize these guys are just, they're not it. You know, they're going to go, but I don't think they need to go right away, especially when there's special players above them.
You know what I'm shocked about is the fact that we're not seeing. I'm seeing more. Like even I looked at Mel Kiper's board to see what he has, and on his big board, like his top prospects, he's got both quarterbacks in the top 5 or 6. I'm like, really? You think those two quarterbacks are the top 5 or 6 players in the entire draft? I'm kind of surprised by that. So yeah. Anyway. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start the clock with the Cleveland Browns. And since you took the Hunter option away from me, and it's interesting because, look, you got the needs there for Pro Football Focus, and I was taking a look at that. It's exactly the needs that I actually have as well. So I love the only one I don't have is edge, and a lot's going to depend, of course, on Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a really big story on whether the Browns get rid of Garrett. It may not be a bad idea. They're a rebuilding team, and boy, you can really rebuild in the NFL if you get because you're going to get a king's ransom for him.
Yep.
So, all right. So, so at this point, I would say you've got left tackle, you've got quarterback. Again, if it's edge, if Garrett's gone, I think Abdul Carter is a perfect replacement to just fit him in there. I think corner, again, is definitely something that they need to consider here. But I don't know. You know, I'm going to go ahead and say that, boy, I don't know if I want to take a quarterback here because I know how I feel. But I just wonder if Cleveland's going to, I get the feeling Cleveland could do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'll put a quarterback in there. I'm going to go ahead and put Cam Ward in there.
All right. Cam Ward, final pick. Great.
I mean, what would you have thought?
It's a coin toss. My argument for quarterback is they need to do something, and it needs to be cost controlled, meaning they can't afford to get into a bidding war over Russell Wilson, even Kirk Cousins. There's going to be suitors for those guys, and I don't know if they can even afford them with what they're paying Watson. And so if they do go quarterback, it has to be in the draft. And if they want to wait till next year and trade Myles Garrett, compile picks, next year's quarterback class will likely be stronger than what you have, and just, punt on this whole season and just make it all about the next year's draft. That's an option as well. But if they go quarterback in this draft, it has to be early because they can get whoever they want at 2 overall. The longer they wait, the more likely these guys start slipping between their fingers. So I like the pick of Cam Ward to the Browns, but it's a coin toss at this point between him and Abdul Carter.
Okay, the Giants are up next, and everybody is wondering the same thing with the Giants. Are they going to go quarterback here? There's a lot of Sanders talk. Taking a look there, what they have for their needs, they have an offensive tackle and a DB. And I did speak to Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post, and I had an interview with him, so I had a little bit of insight there on what he had to say. But this is your pick, so what are you going to do here, Dave?
Yeah, the Giants, I'm in discussions about the Giants in the draft with their fans on a daily basis, and their crowd is just as split as Cleveland, if not even more. A true coin toss on what they should do. The consensus here is that the Giants have to make a move at quarterback this year, and it might be in free agency. It might be via trade, but they have to do something. They are pressed up against the wall. If these guys want to have a job in 2026, they have to be close to 500 at least this upcoming season. And they currently only have Tommy DeVito on the roster. But the question circles back to this quarterback class. Are you sure, in this case, Shedeur Sanders is a guy that you can draft at 3 overall, and he's going to lead you to that promised land of being a 500 team right away? Or do you try to make the rest of the roster much stronger and win games in a different manner with a game manager? If Derek Carr becomes available, if Russell Wilson, who the Giants did pursue last year, wants to sign here. And I think that needs to be the path, because if you take a rookie quarterback, there is so much unknown around that situation. I'm going to go with the best player in the draft, the guy that can add identity to this team, Abdul Carter from Penn State.
Okay. Going with definitely the best player on the board. I don't think there's any doubt about that in my mind.
Greg, I'll be right back, man. All right.
Sure.
You start making the pick for number 4.
You got it. So I'm going to go ahead then and get the clock started to 2 minutes. Okay. And Abdul Carter is gone. All right. So I've got the Patriots, and the Patriots, let's see what they have. Make sure we've got running back, receiver, and a couple of linemen. Yeah, look, offensive line is definitely the case. I had a good conversation with our insider. You can check out that interview on the channel. But they definitely need offensive tackles. No question about it. You're not going to pick a guard here, obviously. So they need an offensive tackle. They probably need 2. They need a receiver. So Tet's definitely going to come into play. I also look at defensive line, corner, middle linebacker. I think those are the best options for New England. So taking a look, of course, who's available here. Offensive line or wide receiver as far as the talent level up at this point. And with the offensive linemen, it's all going to depend on whether or not it's Campbell or Banks. I think a lot of people believe those are the top 2 offensive tackles in the draft. And then Tet is sitting there. And we know how often the New England Patriots have had problems with a wide receiver. And I know they really need a tackle. But we also know that when you have a young quarterback, you've got to grow with a number 1 receiver. You've got to start that relationship early. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and put Tet McMillan in as the Patriots' top pick.
Tet McMillan, final pick. Yeah, I like and agree. And I think the ideal world is you find the tackle, but it's not the best player. And like you said, the wide receiver is just as valuable. And you get to pay him and Drake May rookie contracts for the next 3 to 4 years. I mean, that is a huge deal that you can go spend as much as you want along the offensive line when guys shake free. So I like the move, and I love McMillan. I think he's the one receiver in this class that could have fit into that top 3 group last year.
By the way, who do you, if you're talking about the 2 tackles, again, Patriots have to take a tackle. They've got to get strong there. If you had to choose between Banks and Campbell, do you have a clear-cut number 1 between the 2 right now?
So I'll throw you a curveball here. Campbell, among those 2, I'm taking Campbell. I feel much more confident he's going to be a good player at the next level. The length concerns are an issue, but Kelvin Banks, to me, he looks more like a guard than a tackle at the next level. So I'm not sure that I would even want to put him protecting Drake May's blind side. But the name I want you to keep an eye on and ear out for in the coming months, the best left tackle tape I watched all season was from Josh Simmons from Ohio State. His year got cut short with that knee injury. He should be back by training camp. But if you're just going to go based on projection, Will Campbell is a safe player to me. But I just think there's a cap to his upside because of the lack of length. Josh Simmons, if what we saw last year was real and he can ascend from that level, he's the best tackle in this class.
So and do you think that there's a possibility that he could actually end like a lot of other GMs and scouts might feel the same way, that he could actually end up a little bit further up the board than people think?
I do. I've talked to a couple of scouts, and they said the best left tackle they saw this year was Josh Simmons. You just don't have a lot on him. That's the one concern, but it only takes one to say, you know what? I don't care. I'm going after the best thing I saw on tape all year.
Okay. So look, we have no idea if Hunter's going to be a receiver or not. We're thinking that's possible, of course. And if that is, then we've got 2 receivers off the board in the first 4, which is a little rare. But again, Hunter's a generational talent, so we're not going to really go down that road like that. But you're on the clock again, Dave. You've got the Jacksonville Jags here, and the Jags have a new head coach, new GM. So they got a whole new feeling there. So a little bit harder to do research when you've got all this newness. But what do you think they're going to end up doing anyway?
Yeah, it is a hard decision to make, and I have a feeling they're going to gear a lot of their personnel acquisition toward the offensive side of the ball with Liam Cohn running the shots, and just watching what they did in Tampa Bay, knowing that he came from that Los Angeles Rams, Sean McVay coaching tree, that, hey, we have to make sure, A, we keep this kid upright in Trevor Lawrence, and we need to make sure that we have multiple options in the passing game. So I do lean to the offensive side of the ball here, but in a new regime, there's not as much pressure to go after need right away. A new regime can truly look at this canvas and say, hey, just stockpile the best players on this roster. And then if and when we're here for a year or two, that's when we can really have a pulse on what this roster needs. So to me, it's going to be Mason Graham, the defensive tackle, or you're going to start reaching for an offensive lineman in Will Campbell, Josh Simmons, Kelvin Banks. And I just can't get past Mason Graham. I think that this team does have a good amount of defensive front talent, but they do lack a true difference maker inside. And as we just saw on Super Bowl Sunday, if a Mason Smith does pan out to be a good player, and then Mason Graham is a stud, and you have Travon Walker, who's ascending on the outside, hey, that's your identity right there. And that's how you win in the postseason, is to be deep up front. So I'm going to go with Mason Graham, D tackle from Michigan.
All right. Awesome. Mason Graham off the board, number 5. And what is that? Is that defensive player, number
Yeah,
1,
I mean,
2?
I would say, or I mean, it depends what you're counting Hunter at.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think you just keep Hunter out of the discussion right now.
Pretty much.
And I would say we're 2 versus 2 right now, offense and defense.
All right, Vegas is next. And I'm definitely looking forward to my conversation with Hondo Carpenter, who does a great job covering the Raiders. You can check him out on YouTube. So I'll be lining up with that one hopefully real soon. I think the Raiders have 4 positions that to look at, to zero in on. Obviously, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and corner. I think those are the 4 I'm looking at, and it looks like that's the same right there. So I feel good about that, obviously. Pro Football Focus agrees with me. Sometimes that could be good. Sometimes that could be bad. But for this part, we'll say it's good. All right, so this is the 6th pick. You know, I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to try to do anything crazy here. I think he's fallen enough. We know he's not going to drop that much. There's been a lot of discussion about how much the owner is infatuated with him anyway. So if he's going to sit there and all I have to do is take him and not have to move up and get him, but why not just put Shedeur Sanders in at number 6?
Shedeur Sanders, number 6. I like it. I think that makes a lot of sense and a lot of reasons, for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
All right. So Shedeur Sanders to 6. All right. Yeah. So now we move on to the Jets at 7. And this is a tough spot to figure out. Had they kept Aaron Rodgers around, I would automatically put Tyler Warren into this spot. Yes, a top 10 tight end, similar to what TJ Hawkinson was to the Lions a few years ago, who went 8th overall. And that's kind of who I'm comparing Tyler Warren to. But now I kind of retract that a little bit, knowing like, hey, they're going to try to build this nucleus for the long-term future. And the nucleus to me is you go after either what you would consider premium positions or the trenches. And I look at what they did in the offensive line last year. They have Olufushanu. They might have a gap at right tackle that we're not too sure about yet. I'm assuming they're going to try to get Morgan Moses back in or give a couple of their young players a shot. But again, to really kind of solidify what they have, I think it's going to be in the trenches. Aaron Glenn's coming from this Detroit system where that's what they did. They just kept on building the trenches. And this is where we come back. We circle back to the 3rd time on this mock. Is there an offensive lineman really worth taking at this spot? And are you confident they can go play on the right side? And between Will Campbell, Josh Simmons, and Kelvin Banks Jr., that's the tough decision that you have to make. I don't see it in Will Johnson at corner. I don't like any of the edge talents. I don't think a wide receiver is worth taking here. So I'm going to stick with my gut here and go with Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU that will play right tackle for both now and the long-term future. And now whatever quarterback they do end up getting, whether it's this year or next, they have that. They can walk into that situation knowing that their bookends are protecting their blind side and front side.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, all that makes sense. I agree with you. Lots going to depend. Obviously, we'll know whether or not they're going to sign Morgan Moses before the draft. So by the time we do a mock draft by mid-March, maybe Morgan Moses is a Jet, and then we turn to another position probably.
Yeah.
So that could happen. All depends on still. If you want to say, hey, Morgan may only be here for a year, let's do what we did last year with Fashanu, and go that route. So I could still see that happening. All right. And by the way, I think the Jets are set up to possibly, if they're going to take a quarterback, you take it in the 2nd round anyway. You take one of those guys. All right. Not that they would take anyone here anyway, because they're off the board, the top 2. Carolina's next. And let's see. So after speaking with my insider, We've got edge, we've got wide receiver, we've got defensive tackle, corner, and safety. So those are the 5 in order. And taking a look at what's left on the board. And again, edge is going to be very important for Carolina, as is wide receiver. But no way am I taking a wide receiver now that McMillan's off the board this high. So you're taking a look at the edge and the top edge players left. Unfortunately, I just don't see a guy that's worthy. I know some people believe that you might be able to sneak in an edge guy at number 8. I don't think I want to go down that road, but I think it's possible. So I think defensive tackle is something that makes a lot more sense. So therefore, I'm going to go with, look, it's going to be between Grant or Nolan at this point. Do you think I'm going to go that route, but do you think either Grant or Nolan is a better fit with what Carolina runs? Or if you had to pick one of those two, which one would you go?
Yeah, they have Derek Brown already, and I think that's the same kind of player as Kenneth Grant brings to the table. And Ashawn Robinson, who I think is still under contract, if I remember correctly, they have those big physical space-eating bodies. Walter Nolan gives them kind of like a superpower freak that takes advantage of having other big guys around him and can really just get a lot of that one-on-one action. And that's where I think he would succeed best in a situation just like what the Carolina Panthers have.
Okay, sounds good. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's put Nolan in as and by the way, from what I've seen outside into not just Pro Football Focus, but all around compared to our lads does value Walter Nolan a little bit higher up the board than most people.
Yeah, we had him in our top 14, I think, heading down to the Senior Bowl, and I don't think anybody had him even close to that. And then he tore it up down there. He was one of the best players, most dominant forces in Mobile all week. And now you're starting to see his name creep up more and more.
And another player to consider at this spot as well would have been Will Johnson. So Will Johnson, corner. They could definitely use another corner, maybe even Starks at safety. So Carolina is going to have a lot of options here. And I don't really think they can go wrong no matter which way they go. But I always like going in the trenches first, then outside on the corners. That's just me, and I don't think they can go wrong with Nolan. Okay, so you're up with the Saints. They have a new head coach. What do you think they're going to do here, Dave? I'll start the clock.
Yeah, I mean, this is another spot where I see the cornerback spot kind of like having a true number 1 kind of sticks out to me. And with them trading Lattimore, and he was on his back 9 anyway. They did trade. They do have Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry, but Paulson Adebo is a free agent this year. I'm not sure what status he'll be with this new leadership in place, but Kellen Moore takes over. I think he comes in right away, hot off that Super Bowl win in Philadelphia, and says, hey, what don't we have here? And to me, it's at wide receiver. It's at playmaker. Let's just call it that. They don't have true playmakers on the outside. The one guy that does inspire some hope is Chris Olave. And I put a tweet out there in the fall that I think we're going to hear more and more about. This kid has a serious concussion problem. He came into the league with a really slight frame, and I think he's had 4 already in his young career, a few to the point where he's knocked out cold, missing multiple games. And even if he does work out, he's more of an accessory piece than a true number 1. So I'm looking to add a playmaker to this offense, and I'm looking at wide receiver, and I'm looking at Tyler Warren at tight end. And it's a really hard decision to make, but I'm going to go with the kid that I think brings the most big play potential to this offense, and it's Luther Burden, wide receiver from Missouri. And there's a lot of I'm actually working on my report for him right now. What most don't know about him is that he was not given as many opportunities as a pass catcher as a lot of these other guys. His targets, he's seen like probably 80 less targets over the past 2 years than some of the other wide receivers in this class. And part of that is offensive scheme based. And when I see his best tape, especially after the catch with the ball in his hands, I'm telling you right now, his movement traits and body type remind me of Malik Neighbors. He's not as polished as a route runner and a downfield pass catcher, but the second they removed him from playing outside and they put him in the slot and they gave him carries, they put him in the return game, the guy is making plays left and right on an offense that has been atrocious. I mean, he was the only thing on that roster worth game planning around, and they still, for a while, were able to hold their head above water, and it was because of him. You put him in an NFL offense with a mind like Kellen Moore, I think we're going to see a star in the making here.
All right. Yeah, I know that Burden's, his stock seemed to drop a little this year, production-wise.
Yep.
And I think that might have misled some people about his game.
Yes.
But that's over with. It's now on to equalizing everybody with all-star games and combines and such. And when you do that, I think you'll see, like you said, that Burden is back to being that type of star impact player that we all thought he was heading into the 2024 season. Chicago, the Bears are next. What's interesting when I was going over the Bears, and we'll be doing an interview there soon too, is that I was surprised that I expected I would find a little bit more needs out there, that they're a little bit better off than I thought. And maybe that's why they have a new coach.
They have a good roster. They do.
A coach that finally decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere. And we were going, why? The Bears, why would you do that? Well, they're not as far off talent-wise as you think. So there's a couple of spots that I was looking at. I think that they should be looking at more than others. That's interior on the offensive line and on the edge as far as on the defense. It looks like they've got the same thing. Now they've got running back there, and I get that, but I don't know. I mean, look, we've got a new guy in town, and I know that where he came from. He's got the two running back system there, and if you can go and get a Sean Genty in there, boy, that would be an awesome way to start your first draft. And I could definitely see that happening, because center, offensive guard, those are things, especially guard, you're not going to be picking that at 10. Edge, I think that's something that they can go with, but I just talked about this before, and I don't think moving down a couple of spots changes my mind. Talking about, well, I just don't know if an edge guy would necessarily be up here either. Yeah, you look at Green and you look at Stewart and a few other guys. I mean, people are high on Williams. I don't know where Pierce is going to go. So I think there's all possibilities. But, at this point, I think we also should be taking a look at best available player. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, I think this is going to be down to two players then. I think it's going to be down to Banks, because like you said, he could play guard or tackle. And I think the Bears could still use more talent along that offensive line. Or maybe they go ahead and jump the gun and decide on taking someone as electrifying as a Sean Genty with their first round pick. I'm going to go ahead though, and I'm going to take Banks. This is going to be my spot for Banks. I just think that because he might be a little versatile, and I think that the Bears are just so desperate just to keep increasing their talent on the offensive line. And everybody can say everything about that running back spot. My time is now up. But the fact is, don't forget, you said it before, where he came from. The Detroit Lions built an offensive line first and foremost, and I think he still needs to do that a little bit with some talent.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting spot at 10 with the Bears, and I actually wouldn't be surprised to see them either move up or move down. If they really find a talent that they want along the defensive or offensive line, they move up and get that guy. I could see that. I could see them moving down too, because there isn't a standout player that was available that say, hey, you got to get him. And often is the case. You do want to go with the big physical guys that can control the point of attack when you have a quarterback that is not good under pressure. And if you're between a rock and a hard place, if you're the Bears, take the offensive lineman and figure it out after you bring them in, because that is going to be the biggest determining factor to Caleb Williams reaching his ceiling. It's not another wide receiver. It's not a running back. It's, can the offensive line protect him? So I think that's a smart move there.
And keep in mind too, I mean, this is a great draft for running back depth.
Yes.
And as good as Genty is, you're going to get good running backs in the second and third round who might end up actually having a better career than Genty in the NFL.
Absolutely. I think that's what's going to hurt Genty in draft weekend, is that a lot of teams are going to be under that impression that, hey, we like this guy, but we can get 90% of Genty grade-wise in rounds 2 and 3. So Why not play the economic game and just go after another position where there isn't as much depth?
Okay, you're up now, Dave, with the San Francisco 49ers. And wow, who would have thought the Niners would be drafting 11?
Yeah, that's why they play the games, guys, right?
That's it.
San Francisco is an interesting spot. You can see now that they're about to have to enter the pay quarterback category. They're no longer paying a 7th rounder to run their offense. They're about to pay Brock Purdy big money. They're going to have to start thinking a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit long-term about where they're not going to be able to spend elsewhere on that roster. And we've seen it with the Bills, and it's still worked out for the most part. We've seen it with the Chiefs, and we're not sure if it's going to work out because they haven't been able to put resources elsewhere. And when you know you can't put resources financially into the offensive line like they have with Trent Williams, who's near the end of his career,
right?
I think left tackle and someone that might not even play this upcoming season is in the scope for this team, and it should be.
It's your
So
boy.
I'm between tackle and corner because Will Johnson is sticking out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, he is now. Yep.
And this is a team that when they have a true lockdown number one corner, Robert Saleh is going back there. I think it's a great schematic fit, and I think he's going to be banging the table for him. It's a tough call, and I'm going to go with this team, and they're both really expensive positions. So I'm between Josh Simmons and Will Johnson, but I'm going to go with the player I feel a little bit safer with just based on medicals alone, and that's going to be Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan.
Yeah, because look, Will Johnson is an absolute stud. He just is. And I don't know if the injury is going to move him down a few spots. I don't know. And again, I think he could very well go at 8 with Carolina. It's just that Carolina's up front just needs so much more help, I believe. And they do have Horn. But yeah, look, I think we could see Will Johnson. I don't know exactly what spot, but he can go as high as 5 or something like that. I mean, he's that talented.
I considered him with Jacksonville at 5. I think that's as high as you could see him go for sure.
Okay, so let's restart the clock. We're now to the Dallas Cowboys. And yes, this is probably one of the easiest ones we can do, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen because Jerry Jones is never that predictable, it seems. But we know, look, last year everybody thought, at some point he's going to draft a running back, right? At some point he's going to go after and sign go get trade one. Never did. And now it's like, okay, well, you have to absolutely get one now, right? So look, the question is going to be just like we talked about. Does he pass? Does he wait for another running back? Or does he go and get a guy that could be off the board at this point in time? The other position I'm looking at is right tackle. I'm not sure Terrence Steele is really the guy that you want out there. I think he's a better swing tackle than he is as a right tackle. So I think that is something they could consider. And of course, Josh Simmons is still on the board. They can think about that. They also could use a wide receiver, maybe another edge guy. And also, I don't know what's going on with Mozzie Smith, but defensive tackle might also be a position that they want to look at. But Jerry Jones is all about flash, and there ain't no more of a flasher skill position player this past season in college than Ashton Jeanty. And so that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go Jeanty to the Cowboys.
All right, Ashton Jeanty. That is probably the most common. If you took a poll of every mock drafter in America right now, that's probably the spot that you see. And I'll tell you what, the Cowboys, their heydays are when Zeke Elliott was in his prime, and they just couldn't get it done with the combination of talent around him. And it doesn't mean it was a failure, but that team had an identity when Zeke was at his peak there. And I think Ashton Jeanty brings that to the table right away.
I mean, just imagine some pressure. CeeDee Lamb and Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah. I mean, that's an exciting offense right there with a quarterback that can get the job done. So I like the pick. It's typical, but I like it. And I think it's typical because it fits.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Now let's reset the clock. Dave, you're up next, and you are going to let us know what you think about the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the offensive line because you know that Tua is not going to reach his ceiling if he has to scramble. He's not a scrambler, and we know how sensitive he is to taking hits, and we don't want to see him take hits. So that's a problem for me to just say, hey, we're going to walk into the 2025 season with our offensive line as is. Patrick Paul did get a cup of tea in the NFL last year at left tackle, and it did not go well. So, you don't want to make a decision based on just a few games on a rookie that was a raw prospect. We all knew that. But I do feel a little shaky marching this team out there without proper security up front. But I do kind of circle back to, hey, you can find quality starting linemen in rounds 2 and 3 every single year. There's quality day 2 guys that go. So what's the next lowest hanging fruit for this franchise? And I'll tell you what, I'm not sure what the future of Tyreek Hill is in this franchise. I do think he'll be there next year. Jalen Waddle will be there next year. I like what they got at Malik Washington. But to me, I start looking towards the receivers, the playmakers. That's what McDaniel's his mantra is can we find someone that can truly make a difference at wide receiver through speed? But I'm not seeing anyone there with breakaway speed. I see good wide receiver prospects, but with Luther Burden off the radar, I can't really bring myself to taking any of these guys.
I tell you what, I can give you Jason's top 5 or insider. You went with the guard first, safety second, receiver, tight end, and defensive tackle.
So you set a position in there that I was not thinking initially, but when you're talking about athletic gifts, speed, ability, leadership, which I do think this roster needs on both sides of the ball, the safety Malachi Starks is kind of standing out to me. And Javon Holland, he's a free agent now. He was not what we thought he would be after a strong start to his career.
Yep.
So I think all those points kind of lead to Malachi Starks being the pick here at number 13.
There you go. 100% agree with that one. That's for sure. He's going to be a stud.
Yeah.
So, Holland, bad season, and he's going to want a big payday, and Jason just doesn't believe they're going to pay him.
Yep,
so
I agree.
That'll be a big open hole there at safety.
All right, go for the Colts.
And by the way, Poyer's also old. Let's keep that in mind. He did not have a good year. So if Holland goes elsewhere, they're not going to bring back Poyer. That means they have a major hole at that safety spot, both at free and strong, at least as of today. All right, now, next up, I'm going to go with the Indianapolis Colts. This is the next team on the list. And I will be talking to Kent Sterling, our resident Colts insider, next week. So look out for that one. But right now, I've got 3 circled. And one of them I don't believe is going to go this high. That's maybe weak side linebacker. But the other 2 are definitely available here. And before I go ahead and jump the gun and say what it is, one of those players is off the board, and I didn't think we was going to get this far anyway. But the other one is still here. But this, to me, is a no-brainer, I think, if he gets down this far. And I think the Colts are going to go after Tyler Warren at tight end if he's still on the board. The Colts have been searching for their tight end number 1 for years. And they've got they got this depth full of tight ends that are all, well, this guy's a good blocker, and this guy is a good receiver, and this guy does this, but they don't have the complete package. And that's what they need. And Tyler Warren is as complete of a package there is a tight end that we've seen in a few years. So, I think Colt fans would be ecstatic if they could get Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I like Tyler Warren. That's another popular pick. Ballard is a very traits-based guy when he goes after early round picks, and his traits are off the chart: height, weight, speed, production, versatile production too. Receiver, quarterback, running back, wildcat quarterback. Does it all. So, and it kind of gives. I feel like this is what Anthony Richardson needs too. A guy that can kind of be a possession type threat underneath, third down. Don't keep running him into traffic. And even in some situations, I'm telling you, he could be a Taysom Hill type running back, wildcat quarterback on short yardage, rather than just throwing Anthony Richardson into the fire every time.
And the other guy I would have looked at to possibly go here would have been maybe corner Brendan Morrison. It's going to be very interesting to find out how high he goes with his injury. We'll see how that goes. But also a very talented kid. I think he's right behind Will Johnson. I think those 2 are just studs at the cornerback spot. So, okay, Atlanta's next. You got the Falcons. So I think the Falcons have a very specific, definite big need, but there are a few other things the Falcons need. So what are you going to do with the Falcons there, Dave?
To me, the obvious answer here is you find a pass rusher. And I know that they kind of picked it up a little bit as the year went on, but they were at some point the least productive pass rushing roster defense in the NFL. And then they tried to manufacture it with blitzes and Ellis, the off-ball linebacker, started kind of tearing it up. I don't want to rely on that again. If he ends up doing the same thing next year, great. You have an extra weapon. But I think you need a guy that every single passing down, he's the one rushing the passer. And you have your option of edge defenders that you want here.
Yeah.
You have, and it kind of based on what does your scheme want? What do you think can project best to the next level? And I'm going to take a little bit of a risk here on a guy that I saw down in Mobile. His best snaps were eye-opening to the point you're just saying, whoa, if he develops or gets more consistent, this is a top-notch edge rusher that you're getting in the middle of the first round, similar to what the Rams got in Jared Verse last year. I'm going to go with Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M because his best tape is better than all these guys' best tape.
Yeah, it's something else. Texas A&M, they've really done a great job of bringing in, recruiting some big-time talent at the high school level. But for some reason, they have a problem. That's the reason why they had a new coach last year, developing the players to make them a really good team. But here they are. Shamar Stewart he's one of these under the radar guys. Really, not a lot of people know anything about this guy.
Yeah, his name is coming up more and more now. I mean, he's been on the national spotlight. He was a top-notch recruit at high schools, and he did have some flashes his freshman year. But as you said, Texas A&M did a great job bringing in talent. They did not do a good job developing it, and that's where I think that him getting into a new room, Raheem Morris-led defense, I feel really good about his immediate production in Atlanta.
Okay, next up, Arizona and the Cardinals. I think speaking of edge, I think the Cardinals are also a team that can use an edge rusher. So along the lines of the fact that we've already spoken about the same kind of names. So they're out there. But also they need a guard. I still think this is too high to pick a guard. Someone might do it. Booker may be the guy, could be Jackson, but I don't even know. Do you think Booker will be a first-round draft pick?
I personally don't think. I think he will be a first-round pick. I personally don't have a first-round grade on him.
Okay.
I know some of the top guys. Daniel Jeremiah likes him a lot. There's some things that I don't like in offensive linemen, the balance issues, the quick redirect, and he just doesn't have that, and it bothers me a little bit.
Okay, so then for me here, I think it comes down to edge. I think it comes down to corner. And again, Morrison is still up there. And it also, there's another wide receiver here who played his wide receiver ball with Marvin Harrison, which would be a really nice fit here in Egbuka. Just imagine having Harrison Jr. and Egbuka on the same team with the Arizona Cardinals. That could be very interesting. So to me, it's going to come down to Egbuka and Morrison at corner. I kind of feel Morrison is the more logical pick, though just putting Egbuka and Harrison out there might be really kind of cool. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Egbuka. This is for fun anyway. So why would I be dumb if I'm 50-50? Why wouldn't I want to be fun here?
Go with what you want to be fun. Yeah.
So let's put Egbuka in there. Let's make him another teammate of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I mean, you have the ultimate playmaker in Kyler Murray, who is unpredictable week to week for a lot of different reasons. But to have, in my opinion, to get the most out of that extreme spectrum of making plays and losing games with Kyler Murray, you want security at wide receiver. You want reliability, and Egbuka and Harrison would give you that immediately. Kind of like a young Ben Roethlisberger throwing to Plaxico Burress and Hines Ward. It's just like, hey, he's still learning the ropes. He's going to lose some games with bad decisions because he's young. That's not why Kyler Murray makes bad decisions, but you do know there's just a lot of hot and cold with his game. And if you can have stability around him, that's where I think you can actually get the most out of that playmaking quarterback.
Okay, so next up, the Cincinnati Bengals. We're not sure about Trey Hutchinson. If he's all of a sudden he's a trade rumored guy. I did speak to John Sheeran, our Bengals insider. I asked him about that, and he didn't really seem to think that was anything more than just talk at this point. But keep in mind, they got to figure out how to spend money on Hendrickson, Chase, and Higgins. That's a lot of money to go around. But the Bengals like to spend on their own, so why not? Let's see if they do it. What are you going to do, though, with the Cincinnati Bengals? Because we're doing this in February.
Yeah, I mean, we've made these mock drafts. I've been doing mock drafts for a long time. And the Bengals, to me, just following the trends, they don't necessarily reach for what they need. They just find good players, and they almost even sometimes don't care if those guys play right away. They don't mind taking a rookie, a first-round pick, and putting him on the bench for a while and letting him develop. And that's where I think this pick is going to lead to. It's going to lead to a guy that, hey, we don't need. Now, the T. Higgins shoot-a-drop could move that a little bit, but they have drafted young receivers over the past few years that have flashed, and maybe they're just going to step right in to the Joe Burrow offense. So I believe it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball. They changed the defensive coordinator. I think they're going to change things up. And you have a few really solid options on the defensive front that can fit into their scheme. But the name that always stands out to me whenever I come to this team, it's Kenneth Grant from Michigan, defensive tackle that has a Dexter Lawrence type feel to his game when he came out of Clemson. Remember back 2019, Dexter Lawrence and Christian Wilkins came to the NFL, and everybody wanted Wilkins over Lawrence because of the playmaking, the athletic ability. But then Dexter Lawrence developed his skill set, his hand techniques, his pass rush capabilities, and now he's probably the most dominant defensive tackle in the game. I see a similar trajectory to Kenneth Grant. They do have young tackles on that roster that could step in, but to me, they're more second string guys. Kenneth Grant is kind of like a marquee defensive lineman that I think could do big things in the AFC North. So I'm going to stick with Kenneth Grant here.
All right. Yeah, they've actually picked some Michigan players.
Lately. Yeah, they dipped into that pool a few times. Yep.
Yeah. So why not? Okay. Seattle's next. And Seattle, a lot of people are wondering whether or not at some point will they start thinking about drafting a quarterback in the future. Well, this is a good draft to do that. Not in the first round, but this is a good draft to do that. Maybe even as high as the second round if you want to go ahead and do that. But I think Seattle, look, I think they could use an upgrade or at least a depth upgrade at offensive line, because we don't know what they think about Abraham Lucas. I don't know. Maybe they like him and they still feel he's their guy and they're willing to go down that road, but he's had a hard time staying healthy. And that's something that really hurt them last year. Keep in mind, Tomlinson is probably not going to be back, but Haynes, they drafted last year. They liked the kid in the 6th round, by the way. They really like that guard, Polynesian kid. So I think they're going to be okay with the 2 guards. So I'm not totally worried about that. They probably add a free agent, maybe a veteran. That wouldn't be a bad idea. But just adding another offensive lineman would not be a bad idea. And a matter of fact, one of them that could be interesting is that kid Membu from Missouri, because do you think he'll be a versatile kind of guy that can play both tackle and guard, which is maybe something that Seattle could use?
My first report on him was he looks like a guard to me.
He does look like a guard.
His name has picked up some steam with a couple guys ever since Daniel Jeremiah said, hey, he's a top 15 player in the NFL draft. Now everyone's on board because everyone follows him. I haven't gotten there with him, and I don't know if he's a tackle. There's a lot of technique shortcomings to him, but he is a really road grader. My favorite tape on him is in the run game. When he gets on top of a guy, he'll push him back, push him through the ground. And I think it's a great fit if he does play guard next level. And then you hedge, if you need a hole, if you have a hole at tackle in a year or two, that's your first option right there instead of searching the market or going after the draft.
Yeah, another guy I would have looked at if they were to stick to the edge deal, because I think the edge guy would be someone like Green. Yeah. Of course, they could also they could probably add another because they got a 3-4 defense. They could probably use another guy alongside Murphy and Williams up front. But yeah, I think right now they need to find an offensive lineman that can help them open up the holes. Like you said, it's a perfect fit. They've got to run the football. I think that's part of the reason they let the offensive coordinator go. Too much passing. They have to run the football. They can't let Geno throw the ball 65% of the time. So I think in order to do that and to prove to everybody that that's exactly what you're going to do, let's go ahead and make Membu the pick here for Seattle.
Cool. Yeah, I like it. I think that's a good fit, personality fit as well. Tampa Bay is in a similar position here where they could go after edge. They could find a guard. I bet they would have Membu circled on their board and they see him go right before and they start hitting the wall and getting a little pissed off about that. But there are other areas on this roster that Tampa Bay is one of the best drafting teams over the past 7-8 years. They just do an awesome job. They find starters in every round, every year. It's really impressive what they do. Bucky Irving, running back of the year among rookies, a 4th rounder. They don't make the postseason without him. And I trust that these guys can just stick to a plan. They don't get fixated on a position. They don't get fixated on a player. They say, hey, let's find our top 3 needs and let's just attack. And whoever the best available player at that spot is. So they do need another edge presence. I don't think it's the most pressing need on the roster. I would love to see them get an interior offensive line, but I'm a little worried long-term about the wide receiver position. Mike Evans is still a very good number 1, but Chris Godwin likely is not back. And the Jalen McMillan had a really strong 3rd year, but I think they want 3 receivers. And this is the area of the draft where I see this next tier wide receiver starting to pop off the board. Matthew Golden from Texas is a guy that we like a lot. Savion Williams is a really fun player from TCU. I have a 1st round grade on. I don't think he's going to go in the 1st round, though. It might be a little rich for him. So I'm going to stick with my gut and go with the wide receiver.
By the way, just I was gonna before you do that.
Yep.
You can do what you want, of course. But my insider, I just interviewed him yesterday, James Yarshow for the Bucks.
Yeah,
he believes Chris Godwin is at 95% back.
Okay,
he believes that. Yeah,
he
just thinks that there's no way that Godwin would. This is a great place for him. The family's there.
Yep.
They got roots. It's the perfect offense for him. But again, that's just his opinion. So, and are you saying that you would only do this if Godwin were to leave?
Yeah, if Godwin leaves, that would kind of put the a stamp on it. But I want to give the insider that you get. I want to give him some credit here. I want to give him some power in this mock.
Okay,
draft.
let's do that.
I'll say Godwin stays with the Bucs, and I'm going to go with a player that I think can help two areas of the roster. It's the middle of the field at linebacker, but can also rush the passer when they need to. Jihad Campbell. It's a name you're going to hear more and more about in the coming months. I think he is an absolute freak that plays the game really hard, really fast, and can do multiple things for a defense that likes to do multiple things.
Yeah, that is a definite need. There's no question about it. And look, Levante David, how much longer can you keep expecting Levante David to be around?
Yep.
So, and they could use some extra help anyway, even with David if he returns. So, yep. That makes a whole lot of sense there. They could also use a corner. Keep an eye on that. All right. So Denver's next. By the way, I'm going to tell James about this. So I'm going to put the pressure on him. I'm going to say, you better be right. Even though, of course, I'm sure we'll be once free agency is over. That's what these mock drafts are for, to start all over again. All right, reboot. Okay, so Denver's next, and boy, they had a really good year, and deservedly so. They're a talented football team. There's a lot to like here. The offensive line, boy, how quickly they have developed a really good offensive line here. I also like most of this offense. The two parts though that I think is going to be in question: running back. I mean, this committee thing is not working. Javonte Williams has not worked out. They need to decide a running back. And of course, Hampton is on the board. Would they go there, or let's just get one later? That's again, we said the same thing about Genty. Well, this is going to happen to Hampton too. Do we wait to get another one, or are we that infatuated with Hampton that we want to go and get him now? So keep that in mind. Also, and by the way, Javonte Williams, he was also a North Carolina guy, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yep.
Oh, so maybe that's not good. Anyway, the other position is tight end. And it's going to be very interesting to find out how high Colson Loveland goes. And we know Peyton loves tight ends. So I think there's other spots to consider, but there's free agency involved. So we're going to have a lot of different things to talk about here with Denver because they have a lot of free agency decisions to make, like at nose tackle. Because Kenneth Grant might be a really good play here. You've got nickel corner. You've got a couple other spots for free agency as well to keep an eye on. But I'm going to go ahead and put Loveland here because, like I said, I think Peyton loves his tight ends. And if he can get someone as talented as Loveland, I think he's going to go ahead and do it.
Cool. All right, I like it. Now on to Pittsburgh, right? A team that is in limbo right now. If there's a front runner, in my opinion, for Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be this one. I think this is where he ends up in Pittsburgh. But again, I don't want to use only that speculation to make this pick. But I don't think they're going quarterback at this spot regardless. You can look at wide receiver. Matthew Golden is a popular fit at this spot. I think I gave them Golden in our lads 1.0 mock draft. Jahdae Barron, a nickel from Texas, is a great fit that can play inside and outside, and the Steelers are going to have two holes to fill in the secondary this offseason. But I'm going to throw a curveball. The first curveball that I've thrown in this mock draft, I think this kid's going to go earlier than many people are projecting, and it's running back Travion Henderson from Ohio State. Ooh, this kid is going to run probably a sub 4.3, and we are going to see probably them let go of Najee Harris, a free agent.
Yep.
So that they're just left with Jaylen Warren, who is a complete antonym back to Travion Henderson. So I like the 1-2 punch. And I think this team needs more playmaking ability. They need more explosive plays. And Travion Henderson, his superpower is explosive plays. I love that fit. So this is my first curveball. Kind of has a little bit Jahmyr Gibbs to the Lions feel to it from a couple years ago.
Yeah, well, look, bottom line, like you said, is that he hasn't run yet. And we know that there's going to be a lot of movement after the combine. Yeah. So why not get ahead of it, right?
Yep.
And because there's some people I know. Mel has Henderson as his 6th running back. So I think he might change his mind too. But I think he knows more, just as much you do, that he's going to run pretty fast. But for some reason, he doesn't like him. But we've talked highly about him a lot. We have on these shows.
Yep.
And come on, he proved it in these big games. Every game he's got a 60, 70 yard, 80 yard touchdown run.
Fast. He's the fastest guy on the field every single time. And he's got a running back, tough guy mindset. Coaches are going to love him, his tangibles, the work ethic, the character. He's a Mike Tomlin kind of guy to me. And they have the hole at running back that they need to fill.
Chargers are next. And, the opposite of the Bears is I was so surprised how many things the Chargers can use considering the successful season they had. Because of that, I think there are a few things that do stick out, though. And because look, for instance, I think they need, they need a 3-4 defensive tackle, 3-4 lineman. They can use a corner. They've got keep an eye on free agency because Poona Ford had such a great season that you would think they'll bring him back if they can afford him. They can use another edge if Khalil Mack doesn't come back. So free agency is going to have a lot to say here too. But they could also use some interior help. I don't think, again, it's too high, I believe, for this. Maybe if you're thinking about Booker, whatever, okay. But the skill positions, wide receiver, tight end, running back. Now, I know a lot of people are probably thinking, well, if Loveland's on the board, come on, that's just too perfect of a fit. There's no way Loveland's going to get by Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh loves his tight ends, and I think that could definitely be the case, but he's off the board right now. We think, and we've talked a lot about Elijah Arroyo on our Senior Bowl coverage, Dave, that, boy, did he look good. Question is whether or not he's moved himself into the late first round or not. Mm-hmm. I think it may be a little bit too high, but maybe not. I mean, 22, I think anything's possible. So Elijah Arroyo is definitely someone to consider. And then also wide receiver. We know they had McConkey was a godsend, but what happened without him, that's something that definitely needs to be replaced. But at this point, I think you're now in that spot where you can grab a receiver in the second round and a third round. And I think you're going to be pretty good with who you get, comparable to what you would get at 22. So in saying, the other spot would be running back. And running back is very important here. And it's actually going to be a position that I am going to go with here. I just think that after what happened last year, you cannot count on Gus Edwards' health. J.K. Dobbins, you definitely can't count on his health. And then that puts you in a bad spot on a running team that is running first. So again, I don't know when Hampton's going to go. You passed on Hampton. So now he's moved down a little bit here, and I'm going to go ahead and take him with the Chargers. But I think you can go a number of different ways, as I mentioned.
Yeah, the Chargers are very much up in the air. Tough team to mock, and they're still kind of early in this Harbaugh regime, and they have a lot of balance on both sides of the ball. They're a little long in the tooth on the defensive line. They could use another, a little bit younger talent out there. But this team in this conference, they have to strike now. Whether you think Kansas City is vulnerable or not, you had Travis Kelce talking about retirement. They just got their butt whooped in the Super Bowl. Their offensive line doesn't. This is the time to strike. And I think Omarion Hampton, like Ladd McConkey, is a guy that helps his team both in the long-term future, but immediately. He is a week 1 starter and would lead that team in rushing, no question, next year. Okay, it's now time to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. We have no idea which way they're going to go. They're going to go Sam Darnold. They're going to go JJ. Packers, right? Packers. Packers, yeah. I'm next with Minnesota. You got the Packers. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm going to jump ahead. So yes, the Green Bay Packers are next. And I don't know. I'm thinking maybe, I know based on my insider, they could be going defense first, but what do you think? Yeah, I like wide receiver if a guy like Egbuka was there, because they need someone reliable at that position. They need a stud. Yes. Well, they have size, they have speed, they have yard after catch, but they also just have guys that drops balls left and right. They have guys that get hurt all the time. Like Egbuka to me would be the ideal fit here, but he's not available. And I think the plan B would be you go to the defensive side of the ball, you attack either the cornerback spot, or you find another pass rusher. And I know they have resources already devoted to the outside, but I'm not sure about Lucas Van Ness. I've watched him a couple of years now, and there's just nothing stand out about his game. He's not a bad player. You want a guy like that on your team, but you don't want him being your number 1 option ever as a pass rusher. And, I think that they could use someone that comes in on third down, on passing downs, and you put him on that wide 9 role and just let him burst off the outside and see what he can do with some of the other talent on that line. I like Mike Green in this situation from Marshall. That's who I'm going to go with. All right. Yeah. Mike Green is somebody that he's going to be real interesting to find out where he lands. Yeah. He could go much higher. There are some people who believe he's a top 10 pick, and he could go maybe late in the first round, which is pretty much where we have him. Yep. So yeah, it's going to be, and again, that's what happens when it's much harder to evaluate the guys from not the lower levels, but of course from the group of 5, whatever you want to call it, the mid majors.
than it is, of course, with the power conferences. Okay, so now comes Minnesota. And, you were talking about the Packers' need with one of those spots at corner. And then I got to thinking, I know Minnesota, they have a big question on what they're going to do here with their two top corners, both being free agents. So again, we're going to know a lot in about a month or so. But Gilmore's getting old anyway, and he doesn't stay around. It seems like he's on a new team every year. And either way, I think they're going to need to get young there. Hopefully, if you're a Viking fan, they keep Murphy. I'm sure that's going to be a major target. They're going to want to make sure they lock him up. And I think even if they lock him up, I think we've waited a little bit too long for Benjamin Morrison in my belief. I think he'd be a really good bargain play at 24.
Yeah, the biggest thing with him will be the medical. And if his medical checks out, he's every bit the corner Will Johnson is. And I mean that. I think he's
absolutely
that good. So this is a good spot for him if you're going to accept some risk. But I would even say if his hip checks out, which is a big injury, that's probably even more serious to me than a knee. If that hip checks out, you could easily see this guy go top 20 and not even be available. So if he is available at 24, you have to feel good about it.
And the other spot too would have been slot receiver. They can use another guard. They can use another defensive lineman, and maybe they got to decide what to do at running back. But this is again a deep class, so they can definitely. This is a team that should definitely think about getting a running back a little bit later.
Yeah. So with Houston at 25, I'm a little worried about this wide receiver room. Stephon Diggs was okay, not great. He's a free agent. Who knows if he'll be back? And I don't want to make long-term future decisions on Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell's injury at the end of the year is probably going to keep him out for a while, but now you're also talking about a guy that keeps getting hurt because he's so small. And that's not why he's getting small, but it was the issue we had with him coming out of Houston is he truly durable enough? Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, like, hey, number 3, number 4 guys in this offense with CJ Stroud, you got to find playmakers. They have one in Nico Collins. And I think an ideal compliment to him is one of my favorite players in the draft. Not a top 10 guy, just one of my favorite guys to watch play football. And it's Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas. He transferred in from Houston, and he was supposed to be a complement to Isaiah Bond, the transfer from Alabama. And it did not take long for Golden to be the number 1 guy in that offense. And this guy has been making plays every year. You just have never heard about him prior to this season because he was at Houston. Matthew Golden is a DJ Moore caliber wide receiver that is going to flash right away at the next level, especially in a CJ Stroud-led offense. So Matthew Golden is the pick to Houston.
All right, there you go. Golden on to Houston. And again, another one of these names that might get lost in the shuffle because of the fact that you got so many other guys that we've heard of a lot more for the past year or two. And he, again, everything you said about this year, even though he had a good year, still not a lot of people knew just how talented this kid was and what kind of season he had and what kind of player he could be at the next level. So not a surprise that he is here. More than likely, this is going to be where he's going to go at this spot in the first round. Rams are next. And with the Rams, boy, this is another team that has a lot of ways they can go. And I know, I've said this enough. That I'm sure you're sick of me saying it, but Les Snead is the god of general managers. He's the man. There's no better GM, or there has not been no better GM in the last several years of what he's done with this team with very little. It's just been amazing. Now the question is going to be, you talked about Stafford. So the question is going to be, because this is really around the lines where you might start thinking, well, maybe I'm going to move into a quarterback here because we're at that second round stage. And this is what happens when you're a second round great quarterback. Sometimes you go right around this spot late in the first round. So it's quite possible that that's what the Rams could do here. Even if Stafford stays, because he's not going to be around here forever. And it all depends on what they feel about Stetson Bennett, of course, but I don't think they really believe Stetson Bennett is their guy, but I might be wrong. So I think quarterback is definitely something to consider. I believe Will Howard would be the best option here if they go that way. Jalen Milroe did not have a really good go at it at the Senior Bowl, and just the same type of season he had, as you said. They can also go tight end. So again, if Loveland's still on the board, Arroyo we talked about, wide receiver is also another need. But I think once again, especially with Golden off now, I think they can just get a receiver a little bit later on. No reason to pick a receiver now when you can get them a little bit later on. They can use a nose tackle, an inside linebacker. They can use edge. But I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead And I'm not going to go quarterback here because I just don't know yet, obviously, what they're doing with Stafford. I still get the feeling he's going to stay, but I don't know. But I'm going to go with a guy that maybe have slipped a little bit. I think it'd be a perfect fit here, and that's Jahdae Barron, corner from Texas.
Yeah, really good pick there. Kind of a guy that isn't talked enough about, and this could easily can come off the board top 15 because he plays so many different positions in the secondary. So I like that fit here.
All right, next up, Baltimore. What do you got with the Ravens there, Dave?
Yeah, interesting roster here. They would love a true wide receiver with some size to bounce out with the rest they have on that roster. Those guys are hard to find. They could use the biggest question in that room right now is probably what is the future of Ronnie Stanley? Because if he's not the long-term future at left tackle for the Ravens, you got to fix that right away. And this team, they are so good at drafting the best players and finding a way for it to work out. I think the best player on this roster fits both of those issues. And it's going to be Josh Simmons, the tackle from Ohio State.
Yeah, no question. They were I was actually surprised how far they got with that line. But when you have a mobile quarterback like they do, that can mask some of the problems along the offensive line. So, yeah, they can definitely use a talent upgrade up front. And there you go. All right, the Detroit Lions are next. And the Lions are also a team that could go, believe it or not, on the offensive line, not because they don't have a bad line, but let's keep in mind, Ragnow has been dealing with this chronic issue that's been going on now for a few years. Nobody would be surprised if any offseason now he retires. So that's something that's over the Lions' head every year. You got Glasgow's, getting up there in age. Decker's getting up there in age. They really, Zeitler's a free agent. So I think they're going to be smart enough that they need to do something along the offensive line because they could use another receiver, but just get them later. They could use potentially another pass rusher. We saw what Hutchinson's going to be coming back off of the injury. So that's something to keep an eye on. A little bit edge depth, a little bit of DB depth as well to keep an eye. By the way, Jeff Risen will be with us, our Lions insider for sure, in the next week or two. So look out for that. But I'm going to stick with the offensive line. I'm going to go because I just think that makes too much sense that they're going to add something here. So I think it comes down, now that you've taken Simmons, I think it's going to come down to maybe Ursary out of Minnesota. Again, there's Booker. Zabel, the kid, did a fantastic job in the Senior Bowl. So he's a guy to watch. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and take Zabel. I think that's a Detroit Lions pick. They like to go with these, kind of picks where, from these schools that are not necessarily like the top schools. So let's go with Gray Zabel and make him their guy.
They love the blue collar guys, and he is as blue collar as anyone in this entire draft, all positions.
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
And what I actually like about Zabel too, you see a lot of the times when these guys come from the lower levels of college football, they need a year. Sometimes they can step in right away and play good enough, but he's not going to be rushed into action right away. But his studs, the base of his game, he was the best player to me in Senior Bowl on the offensive side of the ball. He didn't have a great game, but his one-on-ones were by far the best thing I watched all week. And this guy, just give him a year of NFL development in a strength conditioning program, and you could put him at any interior spot that you want. Just an outstanding pick for a team that is very much values the trenches.
Absolutely. All right. Now we're getting to the last few picks of the round and of our show. We've got two each left. Let's go with Washington. And don't forget, if you were with us last year, you should have been, because we spoke extremely highly about the rookie of the year, everybody's next great quarterback. And I tell you, it was funny when we were going over, I don't know if you remember this, Dave, and I'll probably bring up a video of this, but right around October of we started to do like an early draft thing. It was like October, November. And we both talked about, hey, you know what? I think Jaden Daniels is better than Caleb Williams. And we were both agreeing with it. And we're like, wow, really? You think the same thing?
Yeah.
And then sure enough, we started hearing exactly the same thing from John Cooper and Dan Shanka. And it was like, wait a second. Everybody is in total agreement. This guy's a stud. And he was. So, too bad you weren't with us last year.
One thing we value, we take pride in, is we don't fall victim to groupthink. We aren't going to follow the herd. If we know that everyone just kind of got on Caleb Williams' back 2 years ago and would never leave it no matter what he did. They'd ignore the 33 fumbles. They'd ignore the poor performance first pressure. And they're also ignoring what Jaden Daniels was doing on the field. So I think a lot of that just came from there's a bunch of followers just kind of linking on to what has already been said. So we watch the tape from scratch every single year, and that's what makes our evaluations.
So what do you think Washington's going to do? Because not only did they strike it rich with Daniels, but they had a nice draft. So what do you think they're going to do in year 2 of their regime here?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys are going to be spenders in free agency. I think they're going to go after, if T. Higgins hits the market, I think it's going to be that's going to be a spot that he's going to want to go to, and they're going to want him. That's my prediction for where he ends up if he hits the market. I think that they can probably pursue some talent at cornerback if someone hits the market. But when the draft, I think it's going to come down to the defensive line. There's a lot of green on that roster on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to the backups. They just don't have a lot of depth on that side of the ball at the defensive line spot. And I'd be a little worried there, especially knowing Dan Quinn wants 7-8 guys to rotate in and out. So you kind of go.
There's so much talent left on the board too.
There is. I mean, this is where John and I, when we talk, this 20 to 50, 20 to 60 area of the draft, every time you come up, you're like, wow, there's a lot of talent in this part of the draft. And the defensive line is where I think Dan Quinn is going to want to put resources into again, you have the quarterback that's going to score points and get you the lead. You're probably going to go buy a wide receiver in free agency. Let's find pass rushers that can make a true difference inside out. But he wants big, physical, long, heavy-handed guys. There's one name that's standing out to me, and he's a little bit of a project, and he's not afraid of projects if they have the talent. And it's Mikael Williams, the defensive end from Georgia.
Yeah, he, like you said, project, because one of the things is this is the thing with Georgia kids, is that they don't necessarily put up huge numbers statistically because they're so talented and deep that they rotate so often. And so it's hard sometimes for the average just fan when they're looking at stats to know, well, I don't know. I don't see any great stats from this kid, but it's not about that. We've seen that with the Philadelphia Eagles, who did a great job drafting those Georgia studs on their way to winning a Super Bowl.
Yep.
Okay, next up is Buffalo, and I just did the interview with Matt Perino. It was great to have Matt on. We were looking for a really good Buffalo insider. Haven't had one for a couple of years. Matt did a tremendous job. That's on the channel. Check it out. But he believes they are definitely needing to double down early on defensive tackles. They got to double down early on corners. And they also obviously have the need for wide receiver, and they need edge and guard. So those are the positions. Defensive tackle, of course, is going to be a monster draft. We know this is a very deep draft for defensive tackles. Right now, as far as the players on the board, I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is a little too high. You've got Harmon, you've got Alexander. Those are a couple guys to keep an eye on at corner. You only have at this point, well, you got a couple of guys. I mean, we have no idea what Revel or coming back from the injury and such. There's a few other guys there also to consider. The other thing is I think edge is going to be really important. We just talked about it. And I think right now, I think it's more of they've got other needs I just talked about, but don't draft those guys now. Draft a position where there's so many studs at a spot that you do have a need for, and that's edge. So I'm going right back to edge. And look, there's Scorton, there's Pierce, there's Sawyer, there's the kid from Ole Miss. I don't want to butcher his name, Princely. There's Jalen Walker. Where do you think Jalen Walker is going to end up as far as a position player?
I think he's going to make the Micah Parsons move to a full-time edge, and you can put him into an off-ball linebacker spot here and there. But I do believe that he's still growing into his frame. He's already 245, 50 pounds. And he's not a very good mover off the ball. He actually kind of looks like a little bit of a weakness, a liability when he's in coverage, dropping back from that linebacker spot. So I think he'll be a full-time edge at the next level.
Okay. And of course, the guy that we absolutely fell in love with at the Senior Bowl was Aladejo. I don't think he's going as high, but it will be interesting to see how high he goes. And Landon Jackson, too, looked like a stud at the Senior Bowl. I tell you what, there's so many guys here to choose from. I'm going to leave this up to you, but I want an edge guy. So tell me which edge guy you think the Bills should go with here.
They like to gamble on traits with their defensive line. They like to gamble on athletic ability, pure speed, explosion, get to the passer quicker, and that is James Pierce Jr. in a nutshell.
Okay. And by the way, you look at Pierce and you see there's so much to like about him. I'm actually looking, they've got him ninth on Pro Football Focus, but why is it that I know you guys don't even have him as high. So why is that? What is it? What is the knock on Pierce?
He's not physical. He really does. He lacks a power element to his game. And that's what bothers me the most. For me to put a really high first round grade on a pass rusher from the outside, you have to have the bull rush component to your game. And I can count on one hand how many times he's won with power and strength over the past 2 years. I've seen every snap over the past 2 years. He's a speed and burst guy. He's still growing into his frame. You could say he's young and he'll develop strength in time. That's fine, but not as a top 10 pick. This is where I start talking about him. It's just a lack of power.
Sounds good. Perfect. Now, 2 more to go. Kansas City, Philly, the Super Bowl teams. You got the Chiefs.
The obvious answer here is offensive line, but I want to throw the challenge out to some people to always consider what this team did last year. And they are a forward-thinking franchise. They draft for the future. They always have. Kingsley Suamatia, who did get to play some tackle this year, did not go well, but we weren't expecting to be a year one guy anyway. I think that is their solution at left tackle for next year. And, Joe Thuney, who, give the guy credit for trying to play left tackle and stabilizing it for the most part, he'll shift back inside. They might lose Trey Smith, which is a huge issue. So I understand the low-hanging fruit here is to go off after the offensive line. But I want to consider what else has gone wrong with this team. And I'm a little nervous about what they have in the secondary. I think they've been patching it together with solid players, not great players, for a long time. And for them to really reach the ceiling of what they have up front on defense, I think they need better talent at outside corner.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's a name that probably has as much upside as Will Johnson and Ben Morrison, also coming off an injury, but it was early in the year. He'll be ready for training camp. Siobhan Ravel from East Carolina is the guy that I think makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah. It's keeping in mind that, and this is something that I think a lot of people lost sight of because it's just not it wasn't a sexy name or anything like that. But when they lost Snead, it was just, it really hurt them big time as far as the secondary, like you're talking about. They do a good job of kind of rotating a lot of different guys in from the 5th round and the 6th round. And that's why they do a great job drafting. But Snead goes to Tennessee, and I know he got banged up, but he was a major bust with Tennessee. And look, and as a type of player that when you leave a system like the Chiefs run, and Spags does a great job, maybe that's one of those things where, it's the type of player that probably just would have done a much better job staying with the specific team like the Chiefs. But I see no reason why they won't go right back down that well there. And by the way, it would also be pretty similar, wouldn't it be, if they go with someone like Ravel, because Snead was also a guy from one of those mid-major conferences. Same conference, actually, the AAC, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. Actually, let's see, Snead was Louisiana Tech, but he's with ECU. So anyway, that was just a small point I wanted to bring up. All right, the Eagles. I think every time we talk about the Eagles every year, we see the same thing. Well, they could do just about anything. And I think that's pretty much the same thing that we're going to have here with the Eagles, is they can go a variety of different ways. I think they do need to get younger, though, at offensive tackle. So they need to be a little they need to be a little forward thinking here. I also think it would be a good idea to get another corner, because Slay, he's getting up there in age a little bit. They struck gold last year with Mitchell and DeJean. That is as good as you can get in one draft. But I'm going to go tackle here because, again, I just think, look, Lane Johnson's getting up there in age. And it's really important that they add another guy to the mix along the offensive line. And so taking a look at who's available, I'm going to go ahead and put the kid from Minnesota in here, Ursery.
I was hoping you were going to give them Ursery and not Connerly. And as you'll see, that'll wrap up our draft here. But the what I like about Ursery is I listen to their offensive line coach Stoutland talk all the time. And one of the main traits he'll look for is a guy that can move defenders off the ball. He calls it displaced defenders, meaning you take a defensive lineman and you move him to a spot the defensive lineman does not want to go. You unleash your power. move a man against his own will. That's what he wants, is a baseline trait of an offensive lineman. Connerly looks good with his footwork, his speed. He looks great in space. But I'll tell you what, his lack of power is going to be a problem at the next level. And I don't think I'm going to have a first-round grade on him for that reason. Ursary has some things he needs to fix, but he's not going to be thrown into the fire right away. And if he can fix some of those techniques with the best offensive line coach in the game, he already has that baseline trait in his game. He can move anybody off the ball, and I think that's a great fit.
Okay, so as we wrap up here, we only went with both top quarterbacks. We did not move a quarterback in there. I think when since we were having our discussion, I'm thinking if we did put a quarterback in there, maybe Will Howard is a good fit for the Rams. It's possible.
Yeah, it's possible.
We could see that. Let's see, Arroyo. Arroyo is somebody that could go late in the first round to one of those teams that could use a tight end.
Yep.
So maybe even the Rams. So let's see. We did not go with a guard except Zabel. We did go with Zabel.
Yep. Donovan Jackson from Ohio State is a name I think everyone should keep an eye on. He's a left guard by trade, but he played left tackle when Simmons went down. He played awesome. There are some teams that probably might even view him as a tackle. The fact that he can project as a starter at both spots, that's a name that I think you could see sneak into the end of round one.
And of course, as we said, there's a bunch of edge guys to consider. Jalen Walker is in a lot of first round mocks. I get that. Jack Sawyer, any other JT, the other Ohio State kid is a really talented kid. There is some really good talent though to consider in round two. And when we do that on Tuesday, you're going to see there's going to be a lot of good players that we're going to be able to zero in on and discuss when John Cooper joins us for Mock Draft 2.0. And by the way, will that be available on ourleds.com before our show on Tuesday?
It will be. It'll be available. We're going to make it go live on Monday. If you'll get a first look at it if you subscribe to the Our Lads newsletter, which you can find on the homepage. If you scroll down, you'll see subscribe to the newsletter. You'll get first look at it if you subscribe to that.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Dave, appreciate your time as always. We'll see everybody on Tuesday for our Mock Draft 2.0 special. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Send all the comments you want. We enjoy it, pro or con, and we'll see everybody on Tuesday.